قل أنبئكم بخير من ذلكم للذين اتقوا عند ربهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها وأزواج مطهرة ورضوان من الله والله بصير بالعباد صدق الله العظيم. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Sadaqallahul Azim. Secondly, let us open this agenda by reciting Al-Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And now, will everyone please rise for singing of National Anthem, Indonesia Raya, and official song of Gontor, Oh Pondokku.
For all the audiences, you may now be seated. Opening speech by Rector of University of Darussalam Gontor, Professor Dr. Kiel Haj Hamid Fahmi Zarkashi, MED MPhil. The time for him. Opening speech by Rector of University of Darussalam Gontor, Professor Dr. Kiel Haj Hamid Fahmi Zarkashi, MED MPhil. The time for him.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udzu billahi min syururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Good afternoon, everybody, and صباح نهارك السعيد لكل أعضاء المؤتمر. Thank you for everybody who participate in this seminar. The theme of this conference is very interesting. On behalf of the Rector of the University, I appreciate and I would like to thank you for the committee who hold this interesting conference. The theme is also very interesting, the contribution of Islam on the developing the sustainability of human capital in digitalization era. It is equal to sustainability in the pandemic of COVID-19 in this era. So Islamic economic is now growing discipline of economic based on Islamic teaching. And I think this is very interesting to have the discourse on this topic, because the only discipline of knowledge that are growing that based on Islamic teaching is Islamic economic. And we have to discuss this again and again in various event and conference discussion, group discussion or seminar on other event. Of course, there are numbers of concepts that should be developed in this conference, and also in the faculty, in the Department of Islamic Economics, because this knowledge, this discipline of knowledge is growing and becoming into a certain discipline that based on Islamic teaching. So this is relevant to our University of Darussalam, the host of this conference, that we have the mission of integrating the conventional economic system with the Islamic economic system. Of course, there are a number of steps to be taken by lecturers in doing this kind of integration, because there are a number of concepts that are incompatible with the Islamic teaching, but there are also numbers of concepts which are compatible and can be integrated into the system of economic life of the Muslim. So again, I would like to appreciate to the Faculty of Sharia who initiate and carry out this conference. And also would like to appreciate to Professor Michael Hardy, and who will be the presenter of this conference. And also Dr. Muhammad Abdu, Professor Salina Kasim, Dr. Siapan Lahul, who would be main or key person in this conference. And I hope, of course, this conference will bring the important step in the development of Islamic economic in the future. Of course, the participant also hopefully will contribute the idea, the concept, who perhaps have the experience and can share the experience in this conference. And finally, we come up with a new finding of this conference that will be useful for the faculty and useful for the development of Islamic economy. This is my hope, my appreciation. Of course, we would like to apologize if there are inconveniences during the event of this conference. And again, thank you very much for all the participants, and thank you for the presenter. And please welcome to our university when the pandemic 19 is over, and we would like to appreciate if you come to our university and have the conference in a huge number of people and experts on Islamic economic. It will be very useful for our university. That's what can I say today. Thank you very much again. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
For the next agenda, prayer, which will be led by the Dean of Sharia Faculty, Mr. Dr. Imam Kamaluddin LCM Hum. The time for him.
Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين 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 يا رب العالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وسلم ورضي الله تعالى عن كل صحابة رسول الله أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم أنت ربنا لا إله إلا أنت خلقتنا ونحن عبادك ونحن على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعنا نعوذ بك من شر ما صنعنا نبؤ لك بنعمتك علينا ونبؤ بذنوبنا فاغفر لنا فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت يا الله يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أعلنا وما أسررنا وما أنت أعلم به منا أنت المقدم وأنت المؤخر لا إله إلا أنت يا الله يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين وإلهام ملائكتك المقربين. اللهم ارزقنا علوما نافعة ورزقا واسعا وشفاء من كل داء وسقم. اللهم بارك لنا في علومنا، اللهم بارك لنا في تعليمنا وتدريسنا، اللهم بارك لنا في إداراتنا، اللهم بارك لنا في حركاتنا، اللهم بارك لنا في كفاحنا وجهادنا لإعلاء كلمتك يا الله يا رب العالمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأهلك الكفرة والمبتدعات والمشركين أعداءك أعداء الدين. اللهم ادفع عنا البلاء والوباء والفحشاء والمنكر والفتن والمحن ما ظهر منها وما بطن من بلدنا هذا خاصة ومن بلدان المسلمين عامة ومن العالم عامة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار والحمد لله رب العالمين.
And for the next agenda is photo session. To the all participant, please open your camera. Prepare please. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Once more. 1, 2, 3. The last. 1, 2, 3. Okay. We now very pleased to invite our spectacular host in this noon. Please to go on stage, Miss Andini Rahmawati, MCL, Lecturer of Sharia Faculty. And next agenda, our moderator will be late. This agenda time is yours.
Yes. Thank you, MC, for giving me the time to be the moderator in this great agenda. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, before we start the presentation, and in order to avoid any disturbances during the presentation later, I'd like to ask you to change the mode of your gadgets into a silent mode. And also for the one who join us in Zoom, virtual, join us by virtual, please put your audio also in silent. And for this, I'd like to ask the help from the committee. Maybe you can arrange, because we wish no voice except the speaker. All right. Bismillah. The Honorable Rector, University of Darussalam Gontor, Professor Dr. Hamid Fahmi Zarkasi, MPhil MPD. The Honorable Dean of Sharia Faculty, University of Darussalam Gontor, Dr. Imam Kamaluddin LC MHum. The Honorable Vice Dean of Sharia Faculty, Dr. Muhammad Ghazali MA. Our respectable keynote speaker, Professor Mike Hardy, CMG OBE FRSA. I'm sorry if there is any mistake in my in mentioning your name. So Dr. Muhammad Afdu, Professor Dr. Salina Kasim, and Dr. Setiawan bin Lahuri LCMA. All lecture, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it's such an honor to have you all in this agenda. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all to this prestigious international conference, specifically about the contribution of Islamic economic on developing the sustainability of human capital in digitalization era, held by Sharia Faculty, University of Darussalam Gontor, Indonesia. In this special occasion, we shall have outstanding presentation from our prominent keynote speakers, whom I believe shall enrich our insight and knowledge regarding the theme of this conference. All right, talking about the Islamic economics, human capital, human resource development, and also digitalization era, we will find it really interesting, as it mentioned by our rector previously, especially about the economics, and if we relate it to the Islamic economics also, because nowadays that we are almost in a crisis era. I think this is all around the world because of the coronavirus. So that now we will discuss how are the correlation between these three things in supporting human life, or like the development of human life. But before the presentation begin, please allow me to introduce our keynote speaker today. Our first keynote speaker is, actually I found two names here. I'm so sorry, Prof, if I'm mistakenly mentioning your name. Our first keynote speaker is Professor Michael Hardy, CMG OBE FRSA. That's quite interesting. So I have to search what is the title means, because I'm thinking about this is not like a common title that we gain or we get in our university. All right, he is right now is Executive Director of the Institute for Community Cohesion, or ICIEL, at Coventry University in United Kingdom. So he is also Chair of Intercultural Relation and Founding Director of the Center for Trust, Peace and Social Relation at Coventry University. But in his early career, Prof. Mike was trained as an economist, and led economics department at both Leeds and Central Lancashire Universities in the United Kingdom. Also, he was the Fulbright Scholar in USA. So this part is really interesting when I search about him. So actually he has been twice honored award the OBA. OBA here is not the same like we found in our country, Indonesia. This is special award that he got, or I mean he get from office. This is standing, OBA standing for Officer of the Order of the British Empire. Then the one who award him is the British Empire. This is in 2001. So he also award and he appoint a companion of honor of Santa Michael and Santa George, CMG, in the Queen's Birthday honors in 2010. This is also in the Empire. Was his work internationally in intercultural dialogue, and actually this award for his service of conspicuous national importance and is limited only for 65 people. So recipients are entitled to put the initial CH after their name. So that I found, I think, all the title behind his name, this is from the award that he has gotten from his service. So actually I will complete a bit about him before he presents. His particular interest was in disconnect and underemployed young people, particularly those affected by conflict and refugees, so that there is the correlation to human capital that he will present after this. So in his leadership role, he was active in evaluation and policy advocacy in international affairs and public diplomacy. Actually, during his life, I think he's doing a lot of things, and it was mentioned that he returned to academic life in 2011. We got it from his LinkedIn that he joined to be a professor in intercultural relations at Coventry University. So last but not least, he has a research interest. If you guys want to join and maybe want to discuss something, the research of interest is the imperative of intercultural dialogue, the development of a European index of social integration, the impact of foreign policy intervention on domestic cohesion. All right, I think if I mention all things, we cannot listen to the material. So that without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first keynote speaker that he will deliver a presentation entitled A New Time for Human Capital, Observation on Spirituality and Rationality in Global Economic. All right, lecturers, ladies and gentlemen, students, please welcome Professor Mike Hardy, CMG, OBE, FRSA. The time is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen, if I may. Is that clear to everyone? Good. So, Honourable Rector, distinguished guests, moderator, and friends. Of course, I have many friends who I know are at this seminar. Thank you very much for what an introduction, but also for welcoming me to your seminar and allowing me to contribute. As your rector said at outset, this is an enormously important issue. It's very significant at this time of change and this time of pandemic. Let me start by hoping that everybody is well and that your families are safe at this time. We must together confront the virus and the pandemic, and I'm very pleased that Gontor as an institution is moving on with its discussions and with its scholarship, even in times of pandemic. But it does mean that we are a long way apart. And Rector, as soon as the pandemic is past, I would very much enjoy visiting you in person and meeting you face to face. This is an important time, and my remarks this morning will focus on the specific time that we have and the importance of human capital development, which is the theme of your seminar. Human capital is renewable. When we consume, when we use it, it doesn't go away. It enriches, it becomes stronger. And that, of course, is a major contribution of the spiritual component within Islamic economics. I was trained as a traditional economist at the London School of Economics many years ago, I have to say, at a time when we never questioned spirituality within economic scholarship. So in my training, I focused on rationality, on positive economics, the neoclassical tradition, which focused on the automaticity, the automatic forces of the market. When there's shortage, prices rise. When there's abundance, prices fall. And this applied just as much to labor as it did to capital, as it did to consumer goods. So when there was a good harvest, the price of food was lower. But that tradition of economics doesn't help us fully to embrace the issue of people, human capital and spirituality in this particular age. And that's the theme of my talk this afternoon. I'm not a specialist in Islamic economics, nor am I a specialist in Islamic thinking, although I spend a great deal of my professional life in working around these issues. And I am going to ask more questions, perhaps, than I'm going to provide answers. Let me see if I can share my next screen. Sorry, just I'll get back with you.
Or we can help you to access the slide, Prof. Should we help you?
So I'm going to deal with four things. My sincere apologies for my inability to master technology. Four things. One, I'm going to look quickly at what I call changing times and the new importance for human capital. The theme of your conference makes that assumption, but let me remind you of a few, I think, important issues. Secondly, I'm going to focus on my observations of human capital development in Indonesia. I'm going to look at the specific needs that you have in the archipelago. And then I'm going to reflect on perspectives from Islamic economics. And because I'm a practical person, I'm going to finish by looking at some action, some proactive things we can do as professionals in this area. It's not someone else moving the slides. Can we go back? I don't seem to have control, I'm afraid.
Pardon, Prof. Maybe if you would like us to help you, then the committee, we will do it for you. So that it just...
Okay, so if you go back to back one slide.
Wait, we'll do it for you, sir.
Just go back one, yeah. So in the next slide, I was simply going to look at the transition that we have that's implied in your can we go back?
Sir, this is in progress. Give us a minute to do it.
Okay, no worries. Shall I stop my sharing?
Sure. Mogi, while waiting for the slide, maybe you can just continue so that we will do...
Sure. So as your conference theme suggests, we are now very much in the fourth industrial revolution. This is a particular time, as you are well aware. And the fourth industrial revolution focuses, as your title, on the issue of the digital economy and of the role of challenges to traditional labor through the use of technology, the use of systems and the use of artificial intelligence in particular. I've focused some of my comments on, here we are, on the work of many authors, but there's a very famous quote that I use in my slide from an author, Aldous Huxley, who wrote about the significant change. Yes, scroll down to the next. And these slides are available to you from the organizers. Next slide, please. And this, I think, is quite an interesting theme that I want to develop in my talk. That the charm of history consists in the fact that from age to age, nothing changes, yet everything is completely different. So we have an issue where we are in a different world, but I suggest to you that actually it all appears to be the same. So we have to, as scholars and academics, we have to unpick, we have to look more carefully. The next slide. Who would have thought in our current world of the big changes that have taken place with digitalization? So I give you these four examples. The way in which the world buys its books now, and not through bookshops but online. The way in which we manage our taxi services and our travel. The largest taxi company in the world is Uber, and yet it doesn't have any cars. And how we organize our accommodation and our hotels is not through the traditional use of Marriott and Hyatt, but through Airbnb. And as you know, the commitment and dependency we have to automotive engineering and traditional internal combustion has changed completely with the advent of electric cars. But these three big sectors of the economy are part of the changes that I think are important, that challenge the new era for human capital development. The five big changes that I highlight in my work I've listed on this slide. Shifting global power no longer is the force of economic wealth driven simply by the West, as it used to be referred to. But the rise of Asia is hugely significant, and the rise of Indonesia over this period will be quite substantial and very influential. We know the power of data and automation in the fourth industrial revolution. We have a challenge for our climate and for our abuse and failure to protect the natural resources that we have. And we have a world of increasing inequality, where the divide between rich and poor has become now quite savage and quite challenging for us all. And finally, we have a changing characteristic of conflict. No longer is conflict between nation states as much as between individuals and subsections and ethnicities, cultures and religions. And we have to deal with that quite carefully. Next slide, please. So this is a challenging time for those reasons, and we could spend all our seminar talking about the different challenges that we're faced. But human capital is central to that, because it's defined for me as our capacity to manage the change, to deal with the change. It focuses on relationship between people and the context that I've described. It looks at the political, the economic and the social conditions in which we're coexisting and in which we are employed and generate the income to look after our families. And human capital is indeed how fit we are, how capable we are to respond and take control and benefit from the changes that are taking place. So social and economic systems can provide insights and can mobilize different policy approaches. When I was a young student, and indeed when I was a Fulbright in the United States, I focus on the economics of capitalism. I was trained as a neoclassical economist. I looked also in my Fulbright year at the work of Marx and others in the development of socialist economics. But as I've suggested here on my slide, and your rector indicated, the contribution of Islamic economics and the application of scripture and the holy texts is now a really significant additional system to use and apply. And I shall unpick that in my talk. Next slide. At the time of my study as a Fulbright, I was heavily influenced by the work of Francis Fukuyama, who's at Stanford University now, still very active. And some of you will recall, and if you haven't looked at this concept, it's worth exploring, his book, The End of History. And he refers to when one of the systems that I just referred to, at the end of the Cold War, when the former Soviet Union as a system collapsed in the world, we saw the world vacuum filled by the capitalist system. And at that time, many of us worried that the rush from the Cold War conflict between capitalism and socialism was moving to a monolithic approach through the success of Western liberal democracy and neoliberal economics at the expense of failing to accommodate other systems that existed. Indeed, Fukuyama, as a historian, as a scholar, believed that human history was a linear progression from one socio-economic epoch to another. And I suggest to you it isn't, that it's much more complex than that, as I hope we will see. And the reason why it's important to look at the relationship between Islam and ideas and philosophies and the spirituality in my title and the rationality of classical and traditional economics is for that very reason. Next slide, please. I want to do, secondly, to look at human capital development in Indonesia. We need to be very clear as scholars and observers, and I'm an outsider to Indonesia. I love your country very well and spent many years of my life working in Indonesia. But looking at the human capital is challenging, and it reminds us of how much development we need to continue to strive to achieve. So firstly, human capital in a steady state is measured every year by the World Bank. And I'll report to you some highlights from their observation. What human capital for the World Bank means is the development of your people by the age of 18 years. It shows the productivity of the next generation. The results from that, how well you develop your young people will predict how strong they are to confront and cope with the change I've referred to. Before the pandemic, before COVID, there was some really good news in Indonesia and indeed in many similar income group countries. And there have been significant progress in the quality of human capital in recent years. But this is really in danger now because of the pandemic. Let's look at the next slide. Human capital in a changing world, not a static world, is really focused on quality and a concern for quality. So, why is that important? Because in Indonesia particularly, you are a major opening economy. You move very quickly now to become very influential in global economics, and there's an acceleration of the change of activity. You're a digital economy, and a digital economy in a world which is shrinking because of the power of media and because of the power of digital connections. And you're entering a technologically advancing world, not one that's already advanced, but is continuing to advance. the potential of technology is very, very astonishing. We have developed in the world vaccines to fight this virus, this coronavirus, in 8 or 9 months. They used to take 8 or 9 years. We're in the UK, we're very fortunate. Nearly 12% of the population has already been vaccinated. And this is only 1 year since the initial pandemic started. This is remarkable, and it reflects how accelerating our technology is. We will move soon in a world where petrol engines and diesel engines will disappear. In 10 years' time, we will only have electric vehicles, and only possible because of a technologically advancing world. And I suggest to you also, and this is important for students of Islam and Islamic economics, that we're moving into a more caring world. It doesn't always seem so. It seems still a very frightening world, a very difficult world for many people who are poor, who don't have access to resources for their families. But I think we are moving into a world in which more and more people are committed to the moral and ethical foundations of civilizations and have concern for poverty and have concern for climate and for coexisting with people of difference. Next slide, please. We look at some of the tables. These will be familiar to many of you, and they're available here at the World Bank Human Capital Index. Indonesia's story is actually not bad. It's work in progress, as they used to say on my school report. He could do better. So these are the typical indicators of human capital. And I wanted to put these on the table today because if you're interested in how Islam, how your faith, how your spirituality can help contribute to human capital development, you must look at the indexes that measure it. So your probability of survival to 5 years of age in Indonesia, 98%. If you go back 30 years, that was a much worse figure. Your expected years at school, if you start at 4, your people will spend 12.4 years at school. In terms of harmonized test scores, where 600 is the most advanced human capital, you're around 395, around 400. When you adjust your school attendance for learning, your average is 7.8 years. Your adult survival rate is 85% that survive to 60. And in terms of healthy growth, where disadvantage, absence of schools or absence of good food and healthy conditions stunts the growth of your young people, is much better than it used to be. 72% of your young people are not prevented from developing in the way that they used to be. Next slide. It's always challenging to look at absolute figures of this kind. It's a typical economist, isn't it? I come to you with figures. But it's interesting to make comparisons and to think of one of the major contributions of Islamic economics is to think about obligations. It is to think about responsibilities, not just rational relationships as in other systems of thinking. So here we have the percentage of your national income in Indonesia that you spend in these three areas, and how much of your government revenue as a percentage of GDP. This is indeed a statement of how much investment you're making in human capital at this time. And you'll see, in terms of spending on health, this will be very different in 2020 because the pandemic was only 1.5% of your income. In the region, nearly 5%. In other countries of similar income group, the third column, 4.7%. I always look with great pleasure and privilege when I see the work and role of the Islamic organizations in Indonesia who don't restrict, whether it's Muhammadiyah, NU, or the Pesantren movement, who don't restrict their role at the spiritual level, but are heavily involved in healthcare, in social support, and as well as in education. This table, this metric of human capital explains why that's important. So with education, you're behind the region, you're behind the income group. On social spending, on welfare, behind again. And on government revenue, clearly the government doesn't take enough from taxation in order to give to those key areas. This isn't a time series, as you know. This shows a snapshot in 2018. If you look over years, 17, 16, 15, there is a marked improvement. So there is a radical change for the better. On the next slide. I won't overwhelm you with numbers, and you can study these in more time, but these are complementary indicators of, by the World Bank, of human capital development. And you'll see the sorts of things that are really important. So think carefully. As you look at over in this seminar on the relationship between Islamic economics and human capital development in this digitalization age, these are the indicators that we must focus on. How do we improve in each case? In the first case, 35% of your young people do not read by the time they're 10 years old. That's much better than the rest of the region. Twice the number. So your schools are more effective than most of your region, but it's less effective than countries of a similar wealth. In net secondary enrollment, again, very high levels. Nearly 80% of your children go to school. In deaths not from communicable diseases, you're still quite high. Between the ages of 30 and 70, a quarter of your population die. That's a failure to allow people to develop as human capital and then be mobilized in the economy. Other statistics you'll know. I'm always saddened by how many of you smoke. I used to smoke, but I stopped many years ago. 76% of men over 15 in Indonesia are smokers, and that is an issue. And in terms of human capital development, it's not just, in other words, going to school and going to university, going to college, undertaking training in organizations. It's about well-being. It's about spiritual well-being. It's about your moral approach to life. And that is the essence of the contribution that Islamic economics places, which is quite unique and very different from the rational economic model of neoclassical economics. Your female labour force participation, 53%, and the employment rates are very high in Indonesia. 67% of your human capital is used. It's interesting to see the challenge that we have. Next slide, please. So how does this relate, moving on to Islamic thinking and Islamic economics in general? Don't forget the metrics that matter. The indicators of the quality of your labour force are not just about their academic skills and their technical skills. It's also about their longevity, their survival rates, their ability to contribute. Well, the big things for me in looking at the Islamic perspective on this is about how you translate the moral and ethical foundations of belief and faith into what I've called here the obligations to improve. The commitment that is part of your social contract to continuous improvement. This is something I think is very special and very important. You know, in the Quran, as in many other religious texts from other faiths, there's a very clear understanding that social and economic conditions will not change to fit our needs. We haven't a world in which our God builds a world for us. We have to build our world for the betterment of social economic life. We have an obligation, a responsibility. And I suggest to you that is a very powerful reality for most people worldwide, not just for those within Islam, but it's very important as a foundation within Islamic perspectives on human development, and something I'm very pleased I was introduced to many years ago. So when you have an understanding of economic systems and how we can use labor, how we can use human capital within the modern world, we cannot leave it to the automatic market forces as part of our economic system. We have to intervene. We have to take responsibility, what I call, we have to manage a proactivity. We have to get involved, and we have to change the economic and social conditions that we find exist. Big difference between reacting and being proactive. Can you think any more how important that is from our current pandemic? We can't sit and accept a coronavirus that attacks humankind and our families, our neighborhoods. We have to be proactive. And the same is true of human capital in the fourth industrial revolution. If we have technology advancing, if we have the power of the digital technology world, we have to develop our way of managing it and harnessing it, focusing it on the benefits of our families and communities and of the international community generally. Next slide, please. I hope that I'm speaking slowly enough, and my apologies that my Bahasa Indonesia is non-existent nowadays. So please be patient with me. So through the lens of Islamic economics, as you well know, the development of our people is elevated to a different place than in traditional economic systems. In most systems, labor, human capital, people, are simply a factor of production that you apply to a complex production system. But in Islamic economics, as you know, this is elevated to the concept of stewardship and guardianship. Rather than being based on economic laws of production and consumption about personal, individual gain and private property. Whereas traditional economics of human resources development emphasize the promotion of biological needs, manpower very mechanistic, it's a tool of production. In Islamic economics, we're much more interested in holistic and human-oriented approach, in which human capital has moral responsibility in addition to intellectual talent, to knowledge, and to skills. That's a treasure. That's a real asset that is recognized strongly in Islamic economics traditions. Hence, ethical and moral positions are important. Hence, in my title, what I summarize in spirituality, sitting alongside rationality. Next slide, please. So if we look at schemes of human capital development, think back always to the metrics I showed you from the World Bank and how we can take responsibility for improving the quality of our human capital. But base it on an Islamic tradition is really helpful and really meaningful in the contemporary world. Human capital in Islamic economics is not just a mechanistic tool for production, as in this notion of factors of production. Human capital is noble, it's prolific, and it's purposeful. And I'm sure some of the debates in this seminar will look at those issues more carefully than I. It's noble because it's intellectual and it's moral. Humankind as stewards and trustees, Khalifa. It's prolific because it grows. and is self-renewing. Material assets diminish with consumption. We eat our sandwiches, we eat our rice, it finishes. Human capital grows. And with the commitment to obligation and to self-learning, it grows and becomes more over years. This is something the World Bank indicators forget to stress in their metrics. So human capital for Islamic economics is an active factor of production, not a passive one. Next slide, please. So in the Islamic tradition, these are the sorts of characteristics that I observe. The consequence of looking at the moral responsibility of units of labour. Everyone functions according to his or her ability, according to their aptitudes, to their own choice and liking. So can we mobilise our people to say, these are the assets I have, it's my responsibility to use them to the extent that I can. Market forces still operate, we still have markets in traditional senses, and everybody receives what is rightfully theirs by participating in the market. Unlike in a pure capitalist system, in Islamic economics, there's an understanding that there should be greater equality in participation in the consequences of transaction, profits and loss. And there should be more equitable circulation of wealth. It's always difficult to see that, and we look outside in our communities and we don't see continuing commitment to equality of participation or of distribution. And it should be the case in an Islamic concern for human capital development that we have a removal or at least a reduction in the gap between the rich and the poor. So I've introduced the notion of human capital. I've looked at the metrics, and I've looked also at my observations of the Islamic economics contribution. And I suppose my summary is that we have two big dimensions to put together in our assessment of how to support human capital development in the 21st century. We have a spiritual dimension, which is about our morality and our ethics, about how we take our belief and apply it into the economic systems in which we participate. And we have a rational dimension. We still have a rational dimension and the automaticity of markets. You go back to the philosophy of Adam Smith, who looks at why some nations are more prosperous than others. And it's because they mobilize their markets more efficiently. Next slide, please. I warned you that I would have a set of questions, and those I work with know that tends to be the way I work. The question I have is, do we need to rethink our approaches in this changed world I've described? A world where power, technology, where the advancement of science, where the digital world, where the caring and unequal world that has come so quickly to the 21st century. Do we need to change our response? Do we need to examine how to develop our human capital in a direction which helps them cope with these challenges? And whose responsibility is it to develop our human capital? It's a really important question. In neoclassical economics, in traditional economics, it is the responsibility of the individual. If the individual wants to prosper and look after their families, it is for them as individuals to participate in particular ways. If you don't work, you don't earn. If you don't improve and self-improve, you don't make progress. But in a collective social, moral world, I think it's more complicated than that. I think it may be that our governance structures must be involved. It is the responsibility of our society as a whole to manage the challenges that we face. Is that government? Is that business? Or is it civil society? And I think the answer is, of course, it's all three in different ways. And the way in which our governments, business and civil society work together should be framed on the platform of understanding of both the spiritual and the rational that I talked about. Next slide. So here's a few ideas for what should be central to the way we help and participate with that collective work. We must encourage communities to expect change. One of the really important aspects of human capital is its recognition that change is taking place. Not that I'm a good worker for this problem, this factory, this industrial age, but that I'm an adaptable and agile worker for the future. So we must expect change. We must listen to multiple opinions. I'm very honoured and privileged that you've invited me to contribute to your seminar today and tomorrow. That's an indication that you are interested in an international contribution. And that's a really important part of taking responsibility, even if this particular responsibility, this particular international contribution is very humble and modest and not as powerful as it might be. Let's re-emphasize also how rules can help us. Let's not leave things to chance. Let's set a frame of working in which, with rules don't have to be laws that are policed by governments. They can be self-selected guidance from our faith or guidance from our communities. We must mobilize strengths. Where we see good news, we should highlight it and emphasize it. We should spread the word when we find things that work. And when people are successful, we should reward them not just with finance and riches. We should reward people with autonomy, with the ability to take control of their lives. That's so much more sustaining. Next slide. You'll see that even as an economist, once I begin to reflect on systems of thinking, Islamic economics or neoclassic, we begin to develop opinions. We begin to develop suggestions and proposals. We shouldn't resist that. We should be listening as well, but we should have ideas. Things aren't automatic. We can affect the human capital index that I referred to from the World Bank earlier. We can improve the education of our young people. We can invest in their development for our future. And we can improve their health. And the things within those that we can do is not just helping them to survive or becoming useful to the current system of industry and the needs of labour markets, but to make them more questioning, more resourceful, more adaptable in a time of rapid change. So here are my sort of 6 points. Questions again, and I apologise, but there are 6 points on my list that I tick off. Are we encouraging our young people to be comfortable with uncertainty? How do they relate to experts and decision makers? Do decision makers listen to experts at all? Or do they just make decisions on their basic instincts? I don't think we spend enough time with our young people on letting them relax with uncertain times. We tend to provide structures of certainty, of facts, when the world is uncertain and unknown. Secondly, we have to encourage young people to be innovative and experiment. Very difficult. You'll know, many of you are parents like I am. It's really difficult to allow your children to make mistakes. But that's the way in which we learn to be agile in a modern economy. Thirdly, we have a very difficult world, which is very compassionate. One of the strong teachings of Islam is about compassion and empathy. And that surely is something we must take forward in our human capital development. We must nurture empathy, fight the forces of prejudice, and we must commit to inclusion. Sounds like a political statement, but it's not. It's a common sense statement about a complex world in which so much uncertainty, so much complexity can be better managed by collaborative activity. And collaborative with compassion is something that's really important in Islam, as in many other faiths. We have to support self-learning and self-correction. If people are humble and say that they've made a mistake, we should support them, not chastise them. How many of our young people are striving to be successful and forgetting that to be successful, you need to make mistakes and to ask for help. We need to embed learning in everything we do. I observe many corporates, many businesses, many charities, many governments who do things, who make mistakes, but don't acknowledge they've made mistakes. So how can they learn? We must do that. And how do we normalize inspiration? How do we find people as role models that can inspire us to think more about the world around us and the world beyond us? Now, many of these become very challenging to you as an individual. They challenge me. Do I live up to these? How successful am I in developing myself? But that's really important. And that is what the relationship between Islamic teaching and Islamic thinking and the modern economy will encourage. Islamic economics has lots to contribute to human capital development for the 21st century. Next slide. So there you have it. This is my short contribution. I hope very much that I was clear enough and you have my slides to consider. There is no more important issue than the one you are discussing in this seminar. That human capital development is critical for our livelihoods, for our happiness and well-being moving forwards. Thank you very much for letting me contribute.
All right, my audience, please let's give a big round of applause to Prof. Mike Hardy. I'm sure this is really interesting topic because we are talking about human capital, because maybe usually we are talking about human resource, but nowadays maybe some or two of you just listen, what is human capital? In short, I can say that human resource and human capital a bit same, like it's side by side, but human resource we take from the word resource, it was source of the thing, but human capital is from the word capital. So that's like in economic we can say it like a fund, but we, as what you have just said, it was like we blend it with how Islamic economics seeing the human capital nowadays. Yeah, I do believe that everyone of you in this place and also who are joining us by Zoom, you already have a question, but for now, please hold on, and please, if you want to ask the question who are joining us by Zoom, then you can write down in the comment, and don't forget to state your name and also your institution, and at the same time to whom that you want to ask the question, because after this we will listen to our second keynote speaker that also he will deliver a very interesting topic that I will call our second keynote speaker, that is Dr. Muhammad Abduh. But before that, of course, I said thanks very much to Prof. Mike for the valuable and interesting talk. Our second keynote speaker is Dr. Muhammad Abduh, and before the presentation, of course, I have to introduce him to you all. That now he is actually, I know him long time ago since I do my master, but now he is now in Brunei Darussalam. He is a senior assistant professor at School of Business and Economic University Brunei Darussalam. The things, if I mention all the experience and all the things about him, then we will finish and run out of the time. Dr. Muhammad Abduh, actually, he is doing his bachelor degree in Indonesia in Bogor Agricultural University. So that he did his master degree, the double master. So I can see undoubtable then he knows very much about economic, because first he do magister in Islamic law, so in Ibnu Khaldun University, and after that he continue his master in Islamic Economic Banking and Finance in International Islamic University Malaysia. So and he finished his PhD long time ago also in PhD in Business Administration. So for the research specialization, he is expert in finance, Islamic finance, financial market and investment, so Islamic banking, behavior studies and marketing in banking and finance, applied economic, maybe Dr. Abduh know Prof. Mike also, because I think this is one link about economic and applied economic. So statistic and static inference. About the books, he has so many books that you can just search Dr. Muhammad Abduh, then you will find all the books about economic. So also about the journal and the publication, there are a lot. It's more than, I mean, that's more than 10, of course. So he got the winner, an award in 2014 in International Research, Invention and Innovation. That was about the susceptibility of Islamic banks' credit risk toward macroeconomic variables. And also in 2013, he also received an award, silver medal, just no one is gold medal. So in 2013, he received silver medal in IIUM research about bank customer classification in Indonesia. That's about logistic regression with artificial neural network. And he also received another award in 2013, bronze medal, IUM research, again, the impact of crisis and macroeconomic variable toward Islamic bank deposit. Then about the economic, he has so many experience, and right now he is also associate editor in one of the famous journal that usually maybe the economic students should know this, that Emerald Publishing, United Kingdom. He is the associate editor since 2019. All right, I think without further ado, I'd like to welcome our second keynote speaker, that he will deliver a presentation entitled "The Contribution of Islamic Finance Toward Sustainable Human Resource Development." All right, ladies and gentlemen, lecturers, students, please welcome Dr. Muhammad Abduh. The time is yours.
Thank you very much, Ustazah Andini, for the introductions. Honorable Rector, Professor Dr. Haji Hamid Fahmi Zarkashi, MED, MPhil, and the first keynote speaker, Professor Mike Hardy, CMG, OBE, FRSA, all professors, lecturers, and students attending this online international conference. Waalaikum jami'an tahiyatul Islam, tahiyatan barakatan min indillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And very good afternoon here in Brunei, and perhaps for Professor Mike Hardy is in the morning, early in the morning. Sorry, before I start, I'm not sure whether my voice can be heard clearly or not, because it's like an echo in my system here. So I hear my own voice very loud.
I think we can hear it. We can hear it. Yeah, we can
Oh,
hear
okay,
your
okay.
voice.
Thank you so much. Okay. All right, then. Should I operate my own presentation, or the moderator perhaps can help me?
Actually, you can operate it, and if you would like us to help you, then we will help you.
Okay, okay, okay. This is presentations, and all right. Thank you so much. My presentation topics is about. I'm more practical than Professor Mike Hardy, of course, and since I must admit that this still like the first 10 years of my academic experience and as an academic, yeah. So means for Professor Mike Hardy, I think, and other professors, you can still consider me as a toddler in the academic world. So it's like still new here. But I hope that this my humble opinion with regard to the role of Islamic finance toward sustainable human resource development can be also, perhaps it can just, as an idea to start a discussions. Of course, talking about the human resource or human capital, it is basically part and parcel of the Sharia, definitely. In fact, when we discuss about the objective of Sharia itself, we will find that at least two objectives are directly basically related with the human resource, which number one is the preservation of life and the preservation of intellect. We're basically already touched by Professor Hardy that preservation of life is basically related with the health issues where in particular for Indonesia, I mean, it's a good criticism from Professor Hardy that we only spend, I mean, our index is like 1.5 where other countries is 4.9 or 4.7 if I'm mistaken, right? And I think that's a good we call a criticism, and for especially us as an Indonesians to improve further with regard to the health issue in what I call in our country, and basically how to improve the situations in. Yeah, next slide, please. All right. Okay, let me. My presentation is basically related to the UN SDGs agenda, which is basically sustainable. I'm sorry. Can you hear me, Ustazah Andini?
Yes, Doctor. Yeah, we can hear you. Correct. I think it's better compared to just now. I think you take out your earphone. I think better.
Can, yeah?
Yeah. We hear it better.
All right. So, all right. This is a bit sorry with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, that in September 2015, the world leaders were in agreement to improve the quality of education, water and sanitation, fight injustice and inequalities, and to end poverty and hunger by adopting the Sustainable Development Agenda, which has 17 goals. And I believe this is not something new for everyone attending this conference. Yeah? So basically, those goals are basically tried to be achieved by 2030. Yeah? And out of the 17 goals, in my humble view, there are 4 goals directly influence the development of human resources, which are basically the goals number 1 up to number 4. Yeah? Number 1 is about poverty. Number 2 is about nutrition and food securities. Number 3 is about health and well-being, and number 4 is about the quality education. And next, please. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. So out of the 4 goals mentioned earlier, this presentation is focused on goal number 2 only, which is set to obtain sustainable agriculture and food security, together with improving nutrition and hunger. With the short time given, I try to also touch what I call the goal number 1, number 3, and number 4, but at the end I decided only to discuss number 2 because I was worried that I cannot do justice with regard to the analysis with that. So that perhaps will open the opportunity for others to look at the role of Islamic finance towards the other goals. Yeah? This presentation is only for SDG number 2. Main issues here are to end all forms of malnutrition, including diseases and pandemic, yeah, like perhaps we have for the last 1 year among the people, and increase agricultural productivity to secure foods for all year around through the advancement of technology and research facilities. Yeah? This is a very important goal and directly links to the development of human resources. Yeah? But if you look at the reality and talking about the food security, sustainable agriculture development, yeah? So if you look at the reality, many people from rural areas are nowadays leaving agriculture behind and migrate to urban areas to chase their, I call it like pseudo dreams. Yeah? Of course, out of 1 million going from, from the rural area to the urban areas, yeah, maybe like 1 to 10 are very successful, yeah, but the rest are basically they will come back, back to their own link. Yeah. This situation happens mostly due to the imbalanced development between rural and urban areas. Yeah. This movement, of course, there are some causes, yeah, why people from rural area go to leave agriculture behind and then go migrate to the urban areas, because the imbalanced development between rural and urban areas in both infrastructure and other non-tangible facilities, especially for health and education. Yeah? We cannot lie to ourselves that the health facility existed in villages, rural areas are much more traditional as compared to the advanced, medical facility held by urban areas. Yeah? Next, please. So based on the document published by the UN, there are targets of SDG number 2. Yeah, they have like 8 targets. Yeah, which can be basically classified into a short term, medium term, and long term. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So I try to summarize it. Yeah, so in short term means that try to classify like short term to 2020 to 2025. Yeah, agricultural oriented development policy. Yeah, and then development of state-of-the-art research facility. So this basically the short-term target or short-term objective of SDG number 2. Yeah, whereby in medium term to 2025 to 2030 is a fulfillment of foods and nutrition for women and children. And for the long term, yeah, 2030 onward, that will be to end hunger, sustainable agriculture, food and nutrition security. Yeah. However, as per today, governments and experts are still in the discussion of finding possible way to finance the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development. According to Wilson 2019, says that the average development investment gap is US dollar 2.5 trillion annually, yeah, which from my humble opinion can be financed with the help of the philanthropist fund. Yeah. Now, the report of the World Bank 2016 mentions that the annual global zakat and wakaf potential is approaching USD 1 trillion for the zakat and USD 500 billion for the wakaf, respectively. And thus, potential resources from zakat collection and wakaf alone, yeah, can possibly meet the shortfall in resources required globally. Yeah. Okay, next. So, I was mentioned that this in a global investment gap of 2.5 trillion US dollar annually, yeah, can be financed using the philanthropist fund. From the Islamic perspective, Islamic finance perspective, we call it like Islamic social finance. Yeah. So in this case, before we discuss about the implementation, I would like to maybe a short review, yeah, on what Islamic social finance tools that can be used. Yeah. So it's in general we call it sadaqah. Yeah. So sadaqah can be material and immaterial, and the material both can be compulsory and non-compulsory. Yeah. So, but what we are going to talk is about the material one, because the immaterial definitely, because smiling also in Islam considered as sadaqah, I considered as charity, yeah. But that charity is basically immaterial, yeah. And make people happy, yeah, that's also basically a charity, sadaqah. But we are talking about the material things. So, non-compulsory can be classified into infaq or charity, and then wakaf, yeah? And then compulsory is basically zakat and nazar, or the vote. Yeah? So I believe all of you, knows about what is charity, what is infaq. Yeah? And next we are talking about the wakaf. Yeah? So the wakaf, the definition of wakaf today is to release the ownership of dedicated property, or the mawquf, from the person making wakaf, who is waqif, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that produces and incomes generated from mawquf, or the object of the wakaf, yeah, are available only for religious and humanity purposes, yeah, non-business purposes. Yeah? So it's for religious and humanity purposes. Yeah? I can go to the next slide. Yeah? So, yes, next slide, please.
Yeah, actually the internet a bit slow.
Okay. Can you go to the next slide?
Yeah, well, actually we are moving the next slide, but it's still like stuck. I think that's...
Oh, okay, okay. Never mind that.
Yes,
I will just continue my presentation, yeah?
yes, sir.
So, the wakaf, in English normally called like endowment fund, yeah? The wakaf basically can be classified based on its purpose and based on its output nature. Yeah? So based on its purpose, there are at least 3 wakaf, yeah, types of wakaf, called wakaf khairi, wakaf ahli, and wakaf al-awarid. Yeah? And then for the based on its output nature, that will be the wakaf istithmar and wakaf mubasar. Yeah? So wakaf khairi is basically general wakaf. Yeah, it's basically the wakaf that we all know, and it's normal, very common in the people. Like for example, people try to put their land in wakaf to build the mosque, yeah, and other public facilities, yeah. And then wakaf ahli is basically the wakaf that the output of the wakaf, or whatever, the income, or maybe like the mawquf itself is basically for the benefit of the offspring of of the waqif, the children, the family, and then waqaf of al-awaid is basically the waqaf for a special purpose. So next is about zakat, and I think also people already knows about zakat already, so I don't think I will spend much to explain about zakat. Next slide, please. Then other product of Islamic law or Islamic economics law that I would like to also discuss is Ihya al-Mawat. Ihya al-Mawat literally means bringing to life. In general, Mawat land refers to land that is neglected and uncultivated for a minimum of 3 years. However, the specific definitions of Mawat land differ across the school of thought. According to the Hanafi school of thought, it is a land without irrigation and far away from human settlements. While according to the Maliki school of thought, it is a land which required specific tools to cultivate it and thus neglected for a lapse of time. Whereby Shafi'i and Hanbali school of thought explain that the land, the Mawat land, must be no ownership and uncultivated, regardless the distance from the human settlements. Ihya al-Mawat is revive the dead land or putting an unused piece of land to be used by an individual and acquiring property rights over it. It is based on the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, as reported by Imam al-Bukhari from Aisha radiallahu anha, that the Prophet Muhammad SAW, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever take care of a land that's not in any ownership, he or she deserves the land. However, the irrigation and land acquisitions process must be recognized by the state." The second additional concept under Islamic economic law that I would like to bring up here as well is the al-iqta. Al-iqta is a type of grant to cultivate land issued by the state to certain people for the common interest of the society at large. The Mawat land is given to those who can transform it into an important productive factor in the society. Al-iqta can be classified into three. Iqta at-tamlik, given the full right to the land, both ownership and usufruct. Iqta istiqlal, given the right of usufruct only. And iqta irfaq, given the temporary ownership for a particular purpose. So, in the case of the person granted the land was not able to fulfill the requirement and the target set by the state, the grant could be revoked on the basis of the interest and welfare of the society. Afterwards, the grant can be transferred to another person who is considered more capable to optimize land for the benefit of the society. So, Ihya al-Mawat, the concept of Ihya al-Mawat and the al-Iqta, basically to discourage people from neglecting their lands so that it will be productive all the time, and to make sure that the producers are not only for individual benefit, but also for the benefit of the society at large. So, under Islamic economic law, we have these two concepts with regard to how to make a neglected land to be beneficial for the society. So my proposal is in the next slide. Next slide. Yes. Okay. All right. So as I already mentioned earlier, so the target set by the UN, they have like 8 targets under SDG number 2. So then I group them based on whether it is short term, medium term, and long term. Okay? So what I try to propose is basically using the infaq, zakat, and wakaf, plus later the Ihya al-Mawat and al-Iqta. So what I try to propose is that the infaq, zakat, and wakaf, in order to achieve this SDG number 2, must be managed by authorized institutions, yeah. For example, microfinance institutions, national zakat and waqf council institutions, yeah. This basically authorized by the government or by the state, right? So the objective is basically based on the short term, medium term, and long term. Yeah. Now, with regard to the short term, yeah, the target is to maintain genetic diversity of seeds, cultivated plants, and farm and domesticated animals, and their related wild species, including through soundly managed and diversified seed and plant banks at the national, regional, and international levels. The possible challenges arise are to fund the establishment of the state-of-the-art research laboratory for genetic-related research activities and to provide research funding in the area. Right? So, for the short term, what we need is basically agricultural-oriented development policy, yeah, which are still looking, whereby here in Brunei, where I basically reside now, teaching at the University of Brunei Darussalam. So the leader, the Kebawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia, Sultan Brunei, already set the national agenda. Yeah, it was announced last year that Brunei Darussalam has the agricultural-oriented development policy. Yeah, so they basically try to revive the agricultural industry here in Brunei Darussalam. Yeah, but in my opinion, there are still one thing needs to do. Yeah, basically to build the state-of-the-art research facilities. Yeah, we are currently like if we try to see the percentage of Muslims in the world, yeah, more or less we have like a 6 billion plus total populations of the people in the world, yeah, and 25% of the populations are basically Muslims, yeah. So it's like almost 2 billion Muslims. Yeah? But it is very unfortunate that non-Muslim majority countries has research facilities that can, produce maybe or what you call the COVID-19 vaccine. Yeah. So like 280 million of Indonesians are still rely on their life, their destiny on other countries producing who are producing vaccine. Yeah, so we cannot even have our own local state-of-the-art research facilities. Let's say to do this kind of research, to produce a vaccine to fight the COVID-19. Yeah, so the challenge is basically to get the fund, yeah, I think. So, in this case, I propose like Islamic social finance of Waqaf Al-Awid, yeah, as one of the solutions. Yeah. The research laboratory can be based in one country within the region, and member countries of the region. First time I wrote the article, I was not thinking this applied only for one country, yeah, because as an Indonesians stay in Brunei Darussalam and live in Malaysia for 10 years plus. So I was thinking like this can be a regional-based activities. Yeah, it's like an ASEAN activities, but it's more specific. Yeah, and funding is also came from Islamic social finance tools and the Islamic economics law contracts. Yeah, which is Waqaf for Awarid. Yeah, so. The research laboratory can be based in one country within the region, and member countries of the region can arrange for Waqaf fund for their people with a special purpose to build research laboratory and fund its research activities for the benefit of societies within the region. Yeah? So the lab can be like in based in maybe in Brunei or in Indonesia or in Malaysia. So, but the funding came from people from this region. Yeah. And every member country is given the access to and fair and equitable share of benefits arising from those activities, including genetic resources and associated knowledge from that activities. Now, this Waqaf Al-Awarid fund can also be utilized to improve rural infrastructure and technology advancement of other developing and least developed countries in order to enhance their agricultural productivity capacity. Yeah? So for the short term, though we just passed 1 year, 2020, because we have the COVID, and I visited the website of the UNDP, and they have also some adjustment because of the COVID-19. Yeah. So with regard to their targets. Yeah. Next. So the next is the medium term. Yeah. By 2025, yeah, the target is to end stunting and wasting in children under 5 years of age and address nutritional needs of adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women, and older persons. Yeah. Well, these threats are normally appearing within a community with lower level of income, higher level of poverty, and difficult access to healthy and nutritious foods. Yeah. Obviously, they are categorized, mostly categorized as the poor or al-fuqara, and the needy or al-masakin. Yeah. So, and hence eligible to receive zakat and infaq. So in this case, in medium term, we can use the zakat and infaq, yeah, while still collecting for the waqaf al-awarid, yeah, especially when there are cases of famine and malnutrition. So zakat fund must be disbursed immediately, yeah, cannot wait. Although there are 8 classifications of zakat recipients, the distribution of zakat fund may not necessarily be equal. Yeah, for example, like we have 8, so it must be equal 1/8 portions equally. Yeah, the distribution of zakat fund may be adjusted based on the priority as directed by the authority. Yeah. And furthermore, zakat recipients may not necessarily within the same countries or region. They can be from outside the country, especially countries where Muslims are experiencing famine and malnutrition, such as other countries like experiencing it right now. Yeah? And in the long term, the target was set to achieve food security and sustainable agriculture by, of course, 2030. Yeah? There are 2 approaches of enhancing the productivity in the farm and agricultural sectors, which are by discovering finest quality of livestock and plant seeds while maintaining the size of the land, or by increasing the size of the farm and agricultural land. Yeah? So the former has been, to find the discovering the finest quality of livestock and plant seeds, basically has been discussed just now under the short-term target, which are the establishment of the state-of-the-art research laboratory, where they can do all the genetic-related research over there, and virologies and all these kind of science activities, and whereby the latter is basically to maintain the size of the land or increasing the size of the farm and the land, agricultural land, can be done using Ihya al-Mawat and al-Iqta. So the 2 Islamic economic law tools which I discussed earlier. Yeah. So the Ihya al-Mawat and al-Iqta, this approach has 2 possible ways to achieve, which are by reviving the dead lands, and encouraging landowners to cultivate their neglected lands. So there are 2 approaches. Firstly, to increase the size of the farm and agricultural land by reviving dead lands could refer to Islamic Ihya al-Mawat and al-Iqta. Individuals who are able to cultivate and manage the land far away from human settlements could do Ihya al-Mawat, or those who are able to follow the state and cultivate the designated land for the benefit of the societies, encouraged to apply for al-Iqta, or the land grant from the state. Secondly, the common reason why some landowners are not cultivating their lands. So the second approach is basically to encourage landowners to cultivate their neglected lands. But then the common reason why some landowners are not cultivating their land is because they are lacking of funds and knowledge. Therefore, the state must involve and provide necessary trainings for them, and eventually provide financing to start cultivating the lands. The financing is for the landowners to obtain, for example, fertilizers, finance livestock and plant seeds, doing some groundworks and initial wages for their workers. Now, this financing can be obtained from Islamic microfinance institutions or maybe from Islamic banking, under the most suitable contract available, of course. And then obviously, the financing could also be obtained from infaq and wakaf. As a conclusions, this study is an initial effort at exploring the role of Islamic finance in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as basically to explore the role of Islamic economics law, Islamic finance, with regard to human resources development. But then the limitation is that this study only touched on a bit about the SDG number 2, whereby, as I mentioned earlier, in my humble opinion, there are 4 at least. There are 4 SDGs directly linked to the human resource development. Therefore, I hope this can also, raise an ideas or maybe discussions among us later with regard to the role of Islamic finance on human resource development. There are some challenges and obstacles faced by individual country, if they want to do it by themselves, like an individual country, like maybe Indonesia alone, Brunei Darussalam alone, Malaysia alone, especially for developing and least developed countries. Therefore, this study recommends, so the recommendations of this study, as I already mentioned earlier, that all the targets in the school not to be done by in a country basis, but at least in of a regional basis. For example, ASEAN, Southeast Asian nation. So we have like not less than 9 countries. In ASEAN, with a Muslim majority population will be at in like a 4 country in ASEAN. Secondly, since there is no punishment by law for those Muslims who not pay zakat at the moment, infaq and waqf, this study recommends each country to implement, for example, tax incentive schemes to encourage individuals and organizations to pay zakat, infaq and waqf. So I think that's all for my presentations, and I do apologize for all the mistakes I've done, perhaps the choice of words and whatnot. That's all. Ustazah Andini, I think. Billahi taufiq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and thank you very much.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All right, again, let's give a big round of applause to Dr. Muhammad Abduh for that's really great and interesting and informative talk. All right, ladies and gentlemen, lecturers, Dean, now we are coming to the question and answer session. Then we will have 2 sessions. For 1 session, we will accept 3 questions. Even from online, we got a lot of questions, and some of the questions have been answered by Prof. Mike, but we will acknowledge you about that. Maybe we can share that together. So maybe from the offline first, any question? The audience who would like to ask? All right, I'll Prof. Mike, do you still with us?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us, because there are a lot, Dr. Muhammad Abduh and Prof. Mike, there are a lot of compliment from the audience. They are really interesting with this agenda and conference. So there is some question. This is from Zahiri University Utara Malaysia. This question is to Prof. Mike. He asked about how do you differentiate between human and capital. Actually, I kept questioning about this also, but because he mentioned here is human have soul and spirit, while capital in his understanding seems to be an object. So how do you differentiate between human and capital? Should I read it all or one by one, Prof? Because there is 3 questions for you.
Sure. So, can you hear me all right?
I think three questions. Another one, maybe I can add another one. That's the first is different between human and capital. So the second question is from Mr. Fanani from University of Brunei Darussalam. He asked about, actually, he do agree that human capital is main source of movement and especially in Islamic economic. But how to influence a human till Islamic economic that is only as knowledge but also as a daily action and activities? Then how to influence a human until to be like they have like Islamic economics that not only a knowledge but also daily action and activities. I think that for the first one, then I will continue after this. Yes, please, Prof.
So let's not worry too much about our language. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So capital refers to a factor of production, something that we must use. There are different kinds of capital. There's physical capital, financial capital, digital capital, and also human capital. So it's the use of the language here. So we're not confusing human with capital in the sense of labor capital and raw materials. All of these are capital, and capital is just a label for an asset. So what's interesting, however, is that some capital is material, is without moral and ethical content, without the spirituality I was referring to, and becomes very mechanistic and a tool. Now, one of the great disappointments of traditional economics is that it views labor in that way. So labor becomes, in neoclassical economics, simply a mechanistic tool for production. And it's not surprising then that labor units become dehumanized and become anxious and try and separate their work life from their home life. All these are contributory factors, in my view, to a breakdown in the social contract that we need to have between ourselves as individuals and our families and the broader society. And that takes me to the second question. How do we encourage people to take their faith into the workplace, take their moral and ethical positions from their beliefs into their conduct in economic transactions? Well, it's very much about valuing that and about this notion of the social contract. So when we see good practice among our workers, we should applaud that practice. Good practice is not just high productivity and the production of profit. Good practice is also good behavior and moral and ethical positioning. But our problem is that the system doesn't reward that and doesn't actually reward that as much as it should. Interestingly, as we move into the fourth industrial revolution, many more employers are expecting a qualitative change in the behavior of their workers, a more caring, sharing, open approach. And I think this is to be encouraged. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. So there's another one question from our sister Aziza from University of Diponegoro. Actually, she asked about, there are many advancements nowadays in Indonesia about the system of Islamic economic, such as a merger between Syariah Bank in Indonesia. So the question is, what is your opinion about this merger and the effect for human capital and Islamic economic development in Indonesia? Maybe if not related to Indonesia, you can answer it like in general.
So I'm no longer an expert or studying the development of, most recent development of acquisitions and mergers. But I do think, in general terms, the integration of Islamic banking within mainstream banking will be a positive development. So I think the concept of an interest-based economy, I think, has a short life. Interest rates, as you know, globally are at all times low, and in some cases negative. So a system, an economic system which is based on interest basis, which most, of course, Western-style banks are, has a short life. And I think the integration and coexistence of Islamic finance and Islamic banking and the structures and solutions that are developed that are consistent with the Sharia law governing interest-bearing relations will be helpful. But I'm not an expert in that area.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. So I think I need to read one interesting question from our sister, but actually this already answered by the Prof. From our sister Nurul Rahmaini from Mercu Buana University. Actually, here he asks about Indonesia is a very large country and consists of many citizens, and in her opinion that quality of human capital is not evenly distributed, especially in underdeveloped areas such as in eastern region. So the question is, what kind of strategy should be implemented, especially from Islamic perspective, on human development, so that the quality of human capital can be improved, considering the many potential that arise in Indonesia. So actually in this part, Prof. Mike already answered. Maybe Prof, would you like to share to us, because maybe some of us did not read the comment, so we can share it here.
This was such a good question, and it's so important, because at the center of my talk, I talked about obligation and responsibility, and I talked about who is responsible for changing the patterns and development of our people. And this is a very serious issue, the even spread of investment in our young people across the economy. And we know in Indonesia's case that the eastern part of the country sometimes suffers from a lack of attention compared to the centers around Jakarta. And there's been a long history, of course, in Indonesia of the dominance of Java and the importance of other parts as well. This isn't unique to Indonesia. Most countries have what I called in my answer, a capital city syndrome. Have a problem of the imbalance between the capital city, normally where government and business headquarters exist, and the rest of the country. And I talked also in my talk about how we mustn't leave everything to the automatic forces of the market. In traditional economics, it's market forces which would drive this. I think there is a responsibility by communities, by governments, to equalize the balance across. So what happens in some countries, including my own, is that the government chooses to move its center of activity out of the capital into the north, into the east, into the west. So we have some of our ministries are based in other parts of the country instead of all being centered in the capital city. That requires a deliberate decision. It requires a policy which recognizes the importance of a balanced human development. You can't have an imbalance because you then have detachment. You have separation. What happens in Indonesia historically is that everybody gravitates to the center, the capital. So Jakarta becomes a magnet for people to move who want to improve their prospects and improve their prosperity. And that leads to a self-fulfilling continuation of the problem in other parts. So it's a really good question, because to move our human capital development forward, we have to do it in a balanced way. And we have to take difficult decisions about investing more in backward regions, backward only in the sense that we've ignored them for too long.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Actually, we have another one question to our second keynote speaker, but unfortunately, I'm so sorry. He sent us the warm regard and kind regard, and also he apologized because he had to leave. He has another important meeting. So, but if Prof. Mike, if you don't mind, there is another one question from our brother Sajjad Ali. The question is, actually this is for the second speaker, but if Prof. Mike, if you don't mind to answer it, then this is the question. It's about what are key inputs for other countries striving for implication of Islamic economic system from the country that just now he presented about Indonesia actually, as human behavior in conventional system as observed as a restricting factor. Because our second presenter actually he present about the human resource development, so how to support the sustainable development of this human resource is through the three things, zakat, wakaf, and also like infaq. So I don't know whether, if not, Mr. Sajjad Ali, I will send this question to Dr. Abduh, then he will resend back the answer to you. So,
the
yeah,
question, may I just make a suggestion? This is a question about incentives.
Yes.
It's a question about how incentives and rewards, and I can't answer specifically, and I'm sure our colleague will do so in due course. But I think we have to look creatively and experimentally sometimes at the way we reward behavior and the way we recognize behavior that's different.
All right. This is the last question before the closing. Dear Prof. Mike, I think this is yours today. From Mr. Eko Nur Cahyo, because we got your contact from him. So he has one question to you. How could the Islamic philanthropy, such as wakaf or endowment fund, as the instrument of Islamic finance, enhance and develop the sustainability of a country in the contract of socio-economic area? So what is your insight, the pivotal strategies to deal with?
So, good evening, Echo. I'm very pleased that we can meet in this forum as well as our North forum, and my best wishes to your family. This is a really important issue for some of the work that Echo Nur Cahyo is doing at the moment. But you know, it is actually about who gives and then who influences how the resources are used. Take a state in Fukuyama's term before the end of history, when we had socialist economies. The government in the Soviet Union, take that as an example, made all the decisions about the use of resources, made all the decisions about the distribution of resources. It set the rules, it set the conditions, and it did so theoretically, intellectually, on behalf of the people. In a purely capitalist economy, in the extreme capitalism, let's say, sometimes evident in the West, not very, people leave everything to the market, that the allocation of resources is left to market forces with no influence and no regulation. So somewhere between what Islamic thinking does and what Waqf and Zakat allows to happen is that it can mobilize funding with different motivations. So a philanthropic giving allows you to influence changes in behavior, changes in moral and ethical positions which are stronger and which will contribute to some of the development indicators that we looked at in my presentation. So there's a saying, you know, in colloquial terms, that he who pays the piper chooses the song. So whoever pays the musician then can choose what the song is sold. So the power of wakaf, the power of charitable and philanthropic giving, is that we can influence the use of the funds and the development that follows. And I think you need a balance between, within a social contract that's quite complex between government, as I said, between business and between the not-for-profit sector and the charitable sector. The examples in Indonesia of Wakaf-funded social organizations are second to none in the world. These are remarkable organizations that run really important universities, schools, nursery, health centers, so forth, setting a social agenda which is an important part of human development.
Thank you so much, Prof. All right. Lectures, ladies and gentlemen, students, and distinguished guests. We are actually in conference, and again, we say thank you very much for all the presenters, all keynote speakers, for their really informative, humble, and interesting talk. And so, but before that, I would like to remind to all the audience who join us, please. I think the committee will give you the link for the absence. So please fill up for our further references. And now finally we come to the end. And before that, I would like to say thanks again for all the audience too and all the presenters. And hopefully the presentation will be beneficial for everybody. And we can contact to each other, and especially from Mike. We really hope that we can see you in persons in the future, in the nearest time, inshallah. And far from that, myself, I do really apologize for any shortcoming during this agenda. And I hope to see you guys again in the next agenda, inshallah, by the next year. And I think the committee, would you like to take the picture to all the audience, or it's done in the first? Or you want to take it again? No. Oh, take it again? All right. Please, now we would like to ask all the audience to open the video, maybe for the documentation, so that the committee will say to you, because we have a lot. 204, and we have also like here is 400. We almost have like 600 participants. So there are none. Then, all right, let me count. All right, 1, 2, 3. So the second, we have 9 slides, I think. Second, please open your video. 1, 2, 3. Third. 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Please compile the picture and you can share to the audience. 1, 2, 3. Before last. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Please fill up don't forget, if you want to get the certificate, especially for the students, fill up the absence. And again, thank you very much, and for your kind attention also and participation. We really hope you can join our other program. Good afternoon. See you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I return back the agenda to the Master of Ceremony. Yes, please.
For the last agenda is closing. Let us close our agenda this noon by reciting Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Kafaratul majlis. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.